No one expected it to unfold this way. When Keanu Reeves took the stage at the International Business Forum, the audience applauded. After all, he's seen as a symbol of humility, humanity, and a moral compass in a world of fame and power. He came to talk about justice, the environment, and people. But no one could have imagined that at that very moment, just behind the scenes, Donald Trump would walk into the room, confident, loud, with an army of supporters and his hardline agenda. They hadn't planned to meet. They hadn't planned to argue. But fate brought them face to face on the same stage. And what happened next would go down in history, not only for this forum, but for the entire internet. A clash of two worlds. Keanu, the man who became a symbol of hope, and Trump, the man who tolerates no opposition. Their encounter was more than just a conversation about money and power. It was a choice between two futures, and you'll see it now. The bustling city, a global hub of business and diplomacy, set the stage for one of the most anticipated events of the year, the International Economic Forum. The city's skyline was aglow as a diverse group of thinkers, leaders, and innovators gathered to discuss the world's most pressing challenges. From global warming to poverty, technological advancements to sustainable development, the stage was set for what promised to be a historic series of conversations that could shape the future. Among the invited guests was Keanu Reeves, a man known for his humanitarian work and efforts to inspire positive change in the world. His quiet approach to fame had always been paired with a deep commitment to the causes he believed in, making him the perfect person to address an audience seeking sustainable solutions. Keanu was set to speak about the fair distribution of resources, the importance of investing in the future of humanity, and the need to address global issues with empathy and vision. The atmosphere in the venue was expectant as delegates took their seats, the air thick with anticipation for the discussions ahead. Conversations buzzed around topics of equity, the environment, and technology. Keanu's arrival was met with polite applause, though his presence was subdued compared to the larger-than-life personalities that often dominated the scene. His speech was eagerly awaited, as many believed that his perspective would bring a refreshing approach to the world's economic challenges. As the schedule unfolded, an unexpected name appeared on the program: Donald Trump. The appearance of the former president immediately sparked intrigue, not just for his controversial political background, but for the contrast his views represented in the world of diplomacy. His participation in this forum, especially on topics of global economics and business, was bound to attract attention. The audience stirred with whispers and murmurs of excitement and curiosity as news spread that Trump, a businessman turned politician, would be addressing the very issues Keanu was preparing to speak on. This was no ordinary forum, and what was supposed to be a conversation on the future of the world was suddenly set up to be a collision of ideologies. Keanu, a proponent of compassion and global responsibility, and Trump, a figure often associated with cutthroat business practices and nationalistic priorities, would share the same stage. What was meant to be a thoughtful, progressive dialogue about the future now had the potential to erupt into a battle of ideas, one that would challenge everything from economic strategies to societal values. As the forum commenced, the stage was set for a clash. Keanu, ever calm and measured, was prepared to discuss the principles of equity and the importance of an inclusive future. Trump, on the other hand, was poised to deliver his message, one that would emphasize national self-interest, strong business practices, and a focus on protecting domestic economies. The moment was palpable, the calm before a storm, the quiet before two forces would collide on stage, each with their own vision of what the future should look like. The audience sat on the edge of their seats, watching as the moderators introduced the two figures, each poised to offer a radically different perspective. What was meant to be a forum about solutions was about to become a public arena for ideological warfare. Keanu, known for his soft-spoken wisdom, and Trump, with his fiery rhetoric, were about to face off in a contest of ideas that would ripple across not only the room but the world. The energy in the room shifted. It was no longer a simple conference about global issues. It was the beginning of something larger. A moment when two figures, representing vastly different schools of thought, would attempt to push their vision of the future onto a global stage. The promise of this conversation was no longer just about sustainable development or global collaboration. It was about the values that would define the future of economies, the future of societies, and the future of humanity itself. The quiet anticipation was replaced with a sense of urgency, as the world was about to witness a battle of ideas like never before. The conference room was filled with the low hum of anticipation as the panel began. The topic at hand was crucial: the future of the economy and the role of private capital in solving global problems. The atmosphere was tense, but there was a calm order to the proceedings as each speaker took their turn, presenting ideas that spanned a wide range of economic theories, solutions, and visions for a better world. Keanu Reeves, with his calm demeanor and thoughtful approach, was prepared to speak on the need for equitable growth and sustainable investment in global development. He sat quietly, his eyes scanning the room, absorbing the words of others. On the other side of the stage, Donald Trump sat with his trademark confidence. His usual brashness was held in check, but anyone who had followed his career knew that once it was his turn to speak, he would not hold back. He had a reputation for being a strong advocate of self-interest, individualism, and aggressive capitalism. The contrast between his demeanor and Keanu's was stark, but both men were undeniably powerful figures, each with his own following and supporters. The audience, composed of business leaders, politicians, and journalists, was ready for the battle of ideas that was sure to come. As the first few speakers delivered their comments, the tone of the discussion remained measured and respectful. But the moment Trump stood up to speak, the air in the room seemed to thicken. He began with his usual force, launching into a discourse about the need to prioritize national interests above all else. His words were sharp, each sentence dripping with the sentiment of America first. He spoke of business policies that favored domestic companies, the importance of self-reliance, and a need for a strict focus on national issues. His rhetoric was aggressive, and his delivery filled with conviction. The words echoed through the room, bouncing off the walls, as many in the audience listened intently while others shifted in their seats, unsure of how to react. Keanu, who had been listening quietly up until this point, felt a surge of discomfort. His gaze hardened as he took in the rhetoric. He knew this message all too well. The idea of business that only serves the interests of a few, without regard for the broader consequences, was one he couldn't ignore. His face, usually calm and composed, now betrayed a flicker of discontent. The more Trump spoke, the more Keanu realized that silence was no longer an option. The ideas being presented were diametrically opposed to everything he had spent his career advocating for: sustainability, equity, and social responsibility. The camera zoomed in on Keanu, capturing the slight furrow of his brow, his clenched jaw. The stillness in his posture spoke volumes. He had heard enough, and now he was preparing to speak. His turn was next. The room grew silent, the quiet hum replaced by a growing anticipation. The moderator gestured to Keanu, giving him the floor. As Keanu stood up to speak, the shift in the room was palpable. It was no longer a simple panel discussion. This was a pivotal moment, a crossroads of opposing viewpoints. On one side, the idea of aggressive capitalism, where business operates for the benefit of a few, with little regard for the environment or social equity. On the other, a call for balance, where progress is measured not just in profits, but in the well-being of people and the planet. Keanu stood confidently, his presence calm, yet commanding. He began speaking, his voice steady, but with a quiet intensity. As he spoke of the dangers of unchecked capitalism, of the importance of considering the environment and marginalized communities, the room seemed to lean in. His words were measured, but each one landed like a weight, heavy with truth. He did not raise his voice or resort to hyperbole. Instead, he made his case through facts and compassion. He spoke about the responsibility of those in power to uplift others, to make decisions that benefit the many, not just the few. As Keanu continued, his gaze shifted to Trump, who was now watching him closely. The room held its breath as the two men locked eyes. Keanu's stance was clear. He was here to challenge Trump's ideology, but he would do so with dignity and respect. This wasn't about a personal attack. It was about the future of the world and how they, as influential figures, could impact that future. The tension in the room was tangible. The audience was on edge, waiting for what would come next. Keanu's calm, intellectual approach to the topic stood in stark contrast to Trump's fiery rhetoric. The ideological divide between the two men was now fully exposed. Keanu's words echoed in the room long after he finished speaking. There was no immediate reaction from the audience, no loud applause or angry shouts. Instead, there was a collective pause, as if everyone in the room was absorbing what had just transpired. This wasn't just another political debate, it was a battle of values, of what kind of world they wanted to build. As Trump took the floor again, it was clear that the dynamic had shifted. His response would set the stage for the remainder of the debate. Would he counter Keanu's call for equity and sustainability with more of his aggressive, nationalistic rhetoric? Or would the message of empathy and responsibility take hold? The room was about to find out. The battle of words, ideas, and ideologies had only just begun. As Keanu stepped onto the stage, the weight of the moment was palpable. The crowd, still buzzing from the earlier exchanges, fell into a hushed silence as they awaited his words. Keanu, known for his calm demeanor and intellectual approach to any subject, was about to present his perspective on the economic and social issues that had been at the heart of the debate. He stood tall, his posture firm but composed, as he began to speak. His voice was measured, yet each word seemed to carry the weight of years of contemplation. He spoke of global inequality, the ever-growing divide between the rich and the poor. He painted a picture of shattered ecosystems, where natural resources were being plundered for short-term profit, leaving future generations with nothing but barren landscapes. His words shifted toward the children, millions of them, who were born into poverty, denied access to education, and left to suffer in a world that often seemed indifferent to their plight. Keanu's voice grew more intense as he spoke of the selfishness that was driving the world's political and economic systems. He didn't name names, but it was clear who he was referring to. His criticism was direct, but it wasn't a personal attack. It was an ideological battle, a call for change in a world that seemed to be getting more divided with each passing year. His point was simple but profound. We cannot afford to think only of ourselves, Keanu said. We cannot continue to allow a system that enriches the few while condemning the many. It is our responsibility to create a world that is just and sustainable, where we think about future generations, not just our own gain. The words seemed to hang in the air, and the audience, while initially silent, began to stir. Keanu's message was clear and powerful, and the energy in the room started to shift. There was a sense of anticipation, as if everyone knew that the tension between the two men was reaching its boiling point. And then it happened. Donald Trump, who had been sitting with his arms crossed, his face a mask of calm, leaned forward and interrupted Keanu's flow. His voice, loud and brash, cut through the room, creating a sharp contrast to Keanu's calm and composed tone. "This is nothing but a naive Hollywood fantasy," Trump declared, his eyes locking with Keanu's. "The real world doesn't work like that. We can't just keep handing out things to people and expecting everything to be fixed. It's time to focus on reality and national interests." The room seemed to collectively hold its breath. The words hung in the air, heavy with the force of the attack. Trump's words were sharp, dismissive, and dripping with scorn. He wasn't just disagreeing with Keanu's position. He was belittling it, reducing it to something trivial and impractical. It was a direct challenge, and the audience knew it. Keanu, however, remained calm. His face betrayed no emotion as he listened to Trump's rebuttal. There was no anger in his eyes, no flare of irritation. Instead, he responded with the same quiet strength that had marked his entire presentation. He knew this was not just a debate, it was a battle for the future of the world, and he wasn't going to back down. The tension in the room escalated as the two men stared each other down. Cameras flashed, capturing every moment of the exchange, while reporters began frantically typing on their phones, eager to share the first-hand account of what was happening. The world was watching, and they knew that this clash of ideologies was no ordinary debate. This was a fight for the soul of the future, a battle between those who believed in a world where people and the planet mattered, and those who thought only in terms of power and profit. As the debate raged on, the lines were clearly drawn. Keanu stood firm, his position unshaken, while Trump's attacks grew more personal. The audience was torn, some silently nodding in agreement with Keanu's call for compassion and sustainability, while others, captivated by Trump's forceful rhetoric, sided with the harsh realities he presented. The room, once filled with anticipation, now buzzed with energy. The debate was no longer just about policy or economics. It had become a battle of values. Keanu's calm intellectualism stood in stark contrast to Trump's brash nationalism, and the divide between the two ideologies seemed wider than ever. As the exchange continued, Keanu's message began to resonate more deeply with the audience. He didn't shout or raise his voice. His words were too powerful for that. They didn't need to be shouted. Instead, he relied on logic, on reason, and on the deep conviction that change was possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Meanwhile, Trump's words, while aggressive and passionate, seemed less focused. They were rooted in the present, in the here and now, and lacked the long-term vision that Keanu was advocating for. The audience began to notice this disparity, and it became clear that Keanu's message of hope, sustainability, and justice was striking a chord with many in the room. The debate didn't just end with a few harsh words. It sparked something more, a movement, a conversation that would continue long after the conference ended. As the cameras clicked and the audience watched, the two men stood there, locked in a battle of ideologies that would continue to shape the world for years to come. The debate between Keanu Reeves and Donald Trump had ignited a firestorm of conversation across the globe. The video of the heated exchange quickly went viral, spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. The world watched, captivated by the confrontation between two powerful figures, each representing a vastly different worldview. The online community quickly divided into two camps. On one side, supporters of Trump rallied behind his sharp, pragmatic approach to the economy, praising his commitment to national interests and his focus on real-world problems. They dismissed Keanu's argument as idealistic and disconnected from the reality of modern capitalism. Trump supporters were vocal, using hashtags like #TrumpReality and #MakeAmericaGreatAgain to amplify their stance. They mocked Keanu as an actor, someone with no real experience in economic policy, as if his humanitarian work and genuine concern for global issues were somehow less legitimate. On the other side, Keanu's supporters championed his message of compassion, sustainability, and the long-term benefits of a just society. They viewed him as a symbol of hope, someone who was willing to stand up for the marginalized and fight against the growing inequality in the world. These people rallied around hashtags like #KeanuForThePeople and #ChangeTheWorld, using social media to organize and amplify the conversation. They applauded Keanu for using his platform to challenge the status quo and speak out against the harmful policies that favored the wealthy and powerful. The debate didn't just stay within the confines of social media. Experts, journalists, and political commentators weighed in on the issue, dissecting the debate from every angle. Some praised Keanu for his courage in standing up to a political figure like Trump, while others criticized him for overstepping his bounds. Many pointed out the contrast between Keanu's calm, reasoned approach and Trump's combative, populist rhetoric. There were countless articles, blog posts, and opinion pieces written, with people passionately defending one side or the other. In the days following the debate, the discourse continued to grow. News outlets across the globe picked up the story, with headlines like Keanu Reeves takes on Donald Trump at Global Economic Forum and Keanu versus Trump, a clash of ideologies. Television networks ran segments discussing the implications of the debate, inviting experts to weigh in on whether Keanu's message was a realistic vision for the future or just a naive fantasy. Online forums were flooded with discussions, memes, and hot takes as people from all walks of life weighed in on the fiery exchange. Keanu, despite the growing wave of criticism from Trump supporters, remained steadfast in his commitment to the ideals he had espoused during the debate. Rather than responding to the attacks with anger or defensiveness, he took a different approach. He published a lengthy statement on his social media platforms, addressing the fallout from the debate and reaffirming his stance on the issues that mattered most to him. His statement was calm and collected, just like his demeanor on stage, but it was also deeply personal. In his message, Keanu spoke about the importance of focusing on the future, not just the present. He reminded his followers that the issues he had raised, inequality, environmental destruction, and a need for a more compassionate world, were not just political talking points, but fundamental human rights issues. He acknowledged the criticisms he had received, but emphasized that his goal had never been to win a popularity contest. Instead, it had been to start a conversation, to challenge people to think critically about the systems that govern their lives. Keanu's message struck a chord with his supporters. They rallied around him, seeing his quiet strength and unwavering commitment to justice as a beacon of hope in a world that often seemed more divided than ever. The response to his statement was overwhelmingly positive, with thousands of people expressing their gratitude for his words and support for his cause. Many shared the statement with their own networks, amplifying his message even further. As the dust settled, it became clear that the debate had had a lasting impact. It had done more than just generate headlines or social media buzz. It had sparked a global conversation about the kind of world people wanted to live in. For some, the debate had reinforced their belief in the need for a more compassionate, inclusive society. For others, it had highlighted the harsh realities of the world they lived in and the need for a more pragmatic approach to solving global problems. But regardless of which side people took, the conversation had been ignited, and it was clear that the debate was far from over. Keanu's actions during the debate had elevated him from just a beloved actor to a symbol of moral clarity in a time of division. His willingness to speak out, even in the face of fierce opposition, had earned him respect from people all over the world. The debate had not only been a clash of ideologies, but a pivotal moment in the broader conversation about the future of the world and the role that individuals, not just politicians, could play in shaping it. In the aftermath of the debate, the consequences were swift and far-reaching. The organizers of the International Economic Forum, under immense pressure from the public, issued a carefully crafted, neutral statement attempting to distance themselves from the confrontation between Keanu Reeves and Donald Trump. The statement sought to calm the tensions and present the debate as a minor disruption in an otherwise constructive event. However, the true impact of what had transpired could not be erased by any official press release. The confrontation had already sparked a global conversation, one that refused to be ignored or downplayed. Keanu, having made his stance clear, was flooded with invitations to speak at various platforms. His message of compassion, justice, and a more inclusive future resonated with people around the world. The United Nations reached out to him, offering him a chance to speak at their next session. Educational platforms, eager to promote critical thinking and a new vision for the future, invited Keanu to share his views on a global scale. His voice was now in demand not only from his supporters, but also from those who believed in the power of ideals to shape the world. Keanu's position had evolved from that of a respected actor to a figurehead for a broader movement. His appearance at the forum, with his composed and thoughtful speech, had elevated him beyond Hollywood, making him a symbol of quiet resistance against a cynical, profit-driven global politics. His words, aimed at challenging the status quo, now became a source of inspiration for many who felt their voices had long been ignored. Keanu had unintentionally become the face of a movement for those who wanted to see a more humane and just world, where compassion and sustainability were prioritized over short-term gains and self-interest. The response to Keanu's stand was not without its detractors. Donald Trump, unwilling to let the situation pass without further engagement, escalated the rhetoric. He began using the controversy as a platform to rally his base, intensifying his attacks on Keanu and other perceived elitists. Trump's supporters, who had already viewed the debate as a confrontation between two ideologies, now saw the incident as proof of the stark divide between their vision for the future and that of the more idealistic, progressive forces embodied by Keanu. Trump's words were carefully crafted to appeal to the grievances of those who felt left behind by globalization and who were skeptical of the moral arguments presented by people like Keanu. The division between the two men became emblematic of a broader global conflict, one that went beyond politics and touched on fundamental questions about what kind of world people wanted to live in. On one side stood pragmatic nationalistic approaches, the idea that countries must prioritize their own interests above all else. On the other side stood a more optimistic humanitarian vision, one where global cooperation and a shared responsibility for the future were key pillars. The world watched closely as this ideological clash unfolded on social media, in news outlets, and in public debates. For Keanu, the aftermath was not a simple victory. He did not gain fame for winning a political battle or for beating an opponent in an argument. Instead, he found that his true role in this conflict was to bring attention to the need for change, for a new way of thinking about the world's most pressing issues. His voice, once heard by a select few, now had the power to reach millions, to inspire a shift in how people viewed their own responsibilities to the planet and to one another. But despite the widespread attention and acclaim, Keanu remained grounded. He wasn't interested in becoming a politician or championing a political party. He didn't seek power for its own sake. Instead, he wanted to encourage individuals to think critically, to question the current system, and to imagine a future where human dignity and sustainability were at the forefront. His message resonated with those who believed that change had to come from the people, not from politicians who merely played to the fears and desires of their constituents. Meanwhile, Trump continued to frame the debate in terms of victory and defeat, using it to galvanize his base. For him, the conversation was not about finding common ground, but about asserting dominance and maintaining the status quo. His rhetoric, focused on reinforcing nationalist and populist ideologies, remained a rallying cry for those who felt disillusioned with the current global order. In the end, neither side won in the traditional sense. The debate had become a symbol of the deep ideological divide that characterized much of global politics in the 21st century. But for Keanu, the victory was in the conversation itself. The seeds of change had been planted. People were talking, thinking, and re-examining their assumptions about the world. And that, in his view, was the first step toward meaningful change. His actions had sparked a dialogue about the kind of world humanity wanted to build, one rooted in empathy, fairness, and sustainability. The battle between pragmatism and idealism would continue, but Keanu had already made his mark as a voice of conscience in a time of great division. The aftermath of the heated confrontation between Keanu Reeves and Donald Trump left the world in a state of reflection. The tension and division that had erupted in the conference hall did not have a clear winner. But what emerged from the exchange was something more profound, a global conversation about values, priorities, and the future direction of society. Keanu, despite the storm of attention surrounding the debate, didn't claim victory in the traditional sense. He was not interested in besting Trump or winning the ideological battle outright. His message, rather than being one of personal triumph, became a call for collective action. He didn't want to be seen as a figurehead or a political leader. His purpose was far more significant. Keanu's focus was on shifting the narrative, on pushing the world to question the status quo and to think critically about the future. He wanted to inspire people to realize the power they held in their hands, to recognize that true change could not come from the top down, but from individuals coming together in solidarity. In the months following the forum, Keanu's words resonated across social media platforms, universities, and activist groups. People began discussing what kind of world they wanted to live in, and Keanu's message became synonymous with a shift in values. It wasn't just about rejecting a system that prioritized profit over people. It was about rethinking how we approach issues like climate change, inequality, and social justice. Keanu had sparked a movement, not one that aimed to overthrow the established order, but one that sought to build something more inclusive, sustainable, and compassionate. Despite the growing support for his ideals, Keanu remained grounded, unpretentious, and humble. He was not chasing fame, nor was he seeking to become a figurehead for any movement. The attention that followed the forum's event was something that Keanu allowed to pass by, choosing instead to stay true to his message. He rejected the idea of taking personal credit for the changes his words had set in motion. His success, in his mind, was not measured by how many people followed him, but by how many people started asking questions and examining their own roles in the world. For Trump, the aftermath was one of continued defiance. He did not back down from his rhetoric. Instead, he doubled down, using the confrontation as an opportunity to rally his base even more fervently. His supporters rallied behind him, viewing the conflict as a battle between two worldviews, one of unflinching nationalism and one of idealistic humanism. The division between them seemed to widen, with both sides entrenched in their beliefs, unwilling to see the validity of the other's perspective. Yet, as time went on, it became increasingly clear that the conflict was not just about who was right and who was wrong. It was a reflection of the larger ideological and generational divide that had been brewing for years. In the aftermath of the forum, it was not just Keanu who was listened to. A broader discourse had begun to take hold, one that wasn't centered on individual political battles, but on the greater challenges facing the world. People were increasingly questioning whether the world needed more politicians like Trump or more visionaries like Keanu. Keanu's victory lay not in defeating his opponent, but in shifting the conversation. His words and actions had sparked a much-needed dialogue about how we can reshape the future, one that takes into account the needs of the planet, the well-being of all its inhabitants, and the importance of empathy and compassion. Keanu, having said his piece, quietly stepped away from the spotlight. He left the conference without fanfare, uninterested in the applause or accolades that others might have sought after such a high-profile moment. His focus remained on the message, not the messenger. In his mind, it wasn't about winning or losing, but about ensuring that the message would live on, challenging those in power and inspiring the rest of us to take action. As he walked away from the conference hall, Keanu was fully aware that the world was beginning to listen, not to the political leaders who held power, but to the people who dared to dream of a better world. His work was far from over, but in that moment, he knew that he had done something important. The battle for a more just and sustainable world was not one he could win alone, but it was one worth fighting for. The story of the debate would fade into history, but the questions it raised would continue to echo.